The reason that black people are in the streets has to do with the lives they're forced to lead in this country. And they're forced to lead these lives by the indifference and the apathy and a certain kind of ignorance, a very willful ignorance, on the part of their co-citizens. Everybody knows, no matter what they do not know, that they wouldn't like to be a black man in this country. They know that, and they shut their minds against the rest of it, all the implications of being a black father, or a black woman, or a black son, and all of the implications involved in a human being's endeavor to take care of his wife, to take care of his children, to raise his children to be men and women in the teeth of a structure which is built to deny that I can be a human being, or that my child can be. The great question in the country has been, all the years that I've been living here, and I was born here 43 years ago, is what does the Negro want? And this question masks a terrible knowledge. I want exactly what you want. And you know what you want. I want to be left alone. I don't want any of the things that people accuse Negroes of wanting. And I don't hate you. I simply want to be able to raise my children in peace and arrive at my own maturity in my own way, in peace. I don't want to be defined by you. I think that you and I might learn a great deal from each other if you can overcome the curtain of my color. The curtain of my color is what you use to avoid facing the facts of our common history, the facts of American life. It is easy to call me a Negro or a nigger or a promising black man, but in fact, I'm a man like you. I want to live like you. This country is mine, too. I paid as much for it as you. White means that you are European still, and black means that I'm African. And we both know, we've both been here too long. You can't go back to Ireland or Poland or England, and I can't go back to Africa. And we will live here together, or we'll die here together. It is not I am telling you. Time is telling you. You will listen or you will perish.
We gonna live here together, or we gonna die here together. Man, I don't know any more powerful words to express how I'm feeling right now, and especially how black folk been feeling this last week. So peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into, what's today's date? My glasses all foggy. November 9th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. Just to be real, I took last week off. I wasn't feeling social media, even though I was just like the rest of y'all. I might not have been posting. No, I was posting heavy last week. Because I think Mike even hit me, and he was like, Phil, what's your post been in the gym? Like, I guess that mean they was kind of heavy, they was kind of strong. I'm not quite sure, but listen, it was one of those emotionally taxing weeks. Probably when I think about just my history, my 37 years, I celebrated a birthday a week and a half ago. This has been taxing, emotionally draining, psychologically challenging, and all the other adjectives you want to use to describe the events of this past week. And so with that said, I knew I had to come back with something strong. I know y'all enjoy seeing me. I know y'all enjoy seeing Dr. Umar videos. That hasn't changed, right? That hasn't changed. So feel free to hit the Cash App, hashtag Quantify LLC gifts, especially it's my birthday. So I'm definitely taking gifts. But I wanted to come back with something strong. I wanted to come back with a conversation that was meaningful, and I didn't want to be selfish and have it alone, because I am not the only individual who has thoughts about how black folk in particular can improve their circumstances, their situation. And that was a lot of the conversation this past week. We know that we now have a new same I'm gonna chill for a minute. We have a new president and vice president on tap with y'all man Joe Biden and Kamala, Mary J. Blige or Beyonce Harris. I got my thoughts about that too. But we gonna get into this. So shout out to the people who are watching on YouTube Live. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Shout out to the people who are watching on Facebook Live. Make sure you hit that share button so other people can see this. And hello to those of you who are on Instagram. Y'all don't get the love, right? Because I got guests on today, and you know I don't really have guests on. So go on over to YouTube at PhilMSW so you can catch this heat that we are going to be talking about. So I wanted to have a conversation on just the state of Black America, the feelings of this last week that's passed, and looking forward to the future in this next 4 years under a Biden Harris regime. So I called in some good folk who I know are thoughtful, intelligent, and will add value to this conversation. So I will introduce them now. So up first, we have Coach D, who is the founder and CEO at Get Fit Fly Right. You see her with this joint. She wasn't doing this on Friday. I'm gonna keep it real. I just met her maybe. I don't even know if we formally met. Like she heard my voice, but I don't think we formally met. So hello to you.
Hello to you.
And
Many blessings.
and let's see. I hear an echo a little bit. Can you put your joint on mute again, Coach D? Do I hear? Yeah, if you could try to fight, you got headphones, Coach D? I don't know if you got headphones or not. If not, I'll figure it out. I'll figure out how to navigate it because I don't want the echo to take place and for people listening. But I met Coach D on Friday. I was participated in something similar to this with some dope folks. Shout out to Wally at the 7:30 podcast. And normally with these types of conversations, right? We all go there. I wanted to show it's like I don't go to the club no more to show my face or go to a cookout to show my face. I'll go on a podcast or what have you to show my face. That's my avenue now. That's what happened when you get a little older, right? And so she was on there, and man, when I say she started speaking truth to power, I was like, all right, cool. I ain't got to talk, right? Because she doing her thing right now, and any point that I wanted to make, she made eloquently. So I appreciate you for being here. Salute to you. And next up, we have my good brother, Dr. Charles Corprew. He's a familiar face to Rhetorically Speaking. It's a brother who is he's the founder of the What's Your Revolution brand. He is the host of the What's Your Revolution show and podcast, available on all streaming platforms, where he interviews Black and brown trailblazers weekly. Again, I tell the story. I met this brother a couple years ago at a Black Enterprise event. And he bought some merch off me, paid me cash. So that's love, right? That's love when somebody do that first and foremost. But again, like him and all the other brothers down there, man, they was just so gracious. And a lot of times when you go to these events, it's about ego, it's about me. But with this event, it was just brothers showing love to other brothers. I've graced his show / podcast. He's come on to mine. So I definitely want to say thank you, brother, for coming through today. Next up, we have Minista Jazz, who is the actor and digital strategist who uses her passion for entertainment and revolution to found Much Different, a virtual event production company for artists, activists, and content creators. Minista Jazz is also the creator of Juxtapose, an interactive game that destigmatizes mental health and heals the disease of loneliness. So salute to you, Minista Jazz, for coming through and showing love. And last but not least, I know you see Black America 2020 and beyond, and you see a little bit melanin deficient. You know what I mean? But that's okay, right? He's the Woody Harrelson to my Wesley Snipes, if we want to be stereotypical in cliche. We got the good brother Mike Olenik, who is a master's level social worker. We met at a screening of Moonlight, and yeah, right, two people who identify as male watching Moonlight, right? It's you don't get it, but it's necessary and it's important. And we just struck up a conversation and we struck up a friendship. And he's somebody who I value because he's someone who gets it, right? And he always amazes me at how much and how in tuned he is and gets it. He's not afraid to challenge me, and that's what's needed, right? Because as y'all know, like I don't like pushback. I don't necessarily like it, but he tell it like it is, and he's honest and he speaks truth to power. And so, hence the reason why he's here today. It's not just because he's a white male, right? He's at the top of the food chain. No, that's not it. He's somebody who really is out here, and not only talking the talk, but he's walking the walk when it comes to this idea of liberation for people, right? He recognizes his privilege. He acknowledges it, right? And so he doesn't apologize. He's not a white apologist. Like, oh, he's like, nah, this is the game, right? And I'm in the game, and so this is how I'm going to leverage my power to help others. So I appreciate you, good brother Mike, for coming through. So
Always good to be out here.
no doubt, no doubt. And so I'm gonna throw it to you, Minister Jazz, because you was here on time, and I love people here on time, right? So I'm gonna throw to you the first question. So it's not even necessarily a question, just reflect on the past week for you, the election, the results, and just the societal response.
Um, I wasn't saying that. News cycle is really interesting, right? So I was chatting with my sister, and just talking about how it went from Walter Wallace Jr. and people in the streets protesting for that to people dancing in the streets just a week later, and actually the day of his funeral. And so it was hard for me to get into the election of things because I don't feel like, it's just like, okay, one person to the next, whatever. It doesn't matter for me. But just to see how much the media has driven this whole entire thing, and how people are so sweet with the current. So, like you, Philip, I took off last week. I haven't been on social media for 2 weeks now. Just doing a detox from it all, so that I can be clear and make sure that my thoughts are mine and not what is being filtered in through the media. So that's. I mean, how I feel about Biden and Harris and Trump. I mean, Trump hasn't conceded yet. It's going to be a terrible transfer of quote unquote power. And I think that when I look at 50% of almost 50% of our country not happy with the new leadership, I believe that we have a deeper systemic problem that we need to address, and not feel like just because we have a new leader, everything's just going to go away. It's not going to happen.
Word, word. Dr. Charles, how about you? How's the last week been for you? What are your thoughts? You gotta unmute yourself. Listen. We should be well versed in this Zoom game by now. After 9 months of quarantine.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I'm not used to having to mute myself, brother. Um, I feel like, I feel like it's interesting. You said the last week, and I think what characterizes the best way early last week, like election night, pre-election, then going through the election. James Carville said, he's like, Democrats, put away the Ambien and the razor blades, right? Because election night, you go through this almost like this PTSD feeling. For me, it felt like I was reliving 2016, watching the returns come in and saying, wait, what? Not again. You know what I'm saying? Are you what? No, this can't be, like, we can't be this wrong, like something, and literally having this level of angst that was palpable. That same, I mean, literally that same feeling was almost like that feeling that I had every time there was a storm in the Gulf since I lived through Hurricane Katrina. it was that. So every time New Orleanians see there's a storm in the Gulf, if you lived through Hurricane Katrina or any hurricane in the, since 2005, there's a level of angst that you get not knowing. And my fellow New Orleanians have gone through six opportunities this year because they've been in the cone of uncertainty 6 times this year. And unfortunately, they got hit last week, 2 weeks ago. And it was that same level of angst. Like what does it feel like? What is my country? If I got to live through this 4 years as a Black person, as a person of color, to live through 4 more years of this, to see the courts packed, to see policies that are disparaging to Black and brown folks, to see our people killed and murdered on the street and with no ramifications. So there was this level of angst. And so there was this low point. And I watched again James Carville the next night, and he said, look, we're gonna be okay. Right. And I understand it's this white man telling me that I'm gonna be okay, but I'm right. In my blood is both Virginia and Louisiana and New Orleans. And James Carville is a long-lived New Orleanian. So I'm gonna trust him. And he said everything's gonna be all right. And so I put some credence into what he was saying. And I started to find some ease as the week started going on. And I remember being with my frat brothers, and I'll shut up, on Saturday, the good men of Omega Psi Phi, and reading through my text. And one of my good friends wrote, CNN just called it. And there was this level, it was like this gorilla had finally said, I'm done. I can't hold on to you any longer. And this weight kind of lifted, like, and that's what the last week has felt like for me.
Word. Coach D, what about you? What are your thoughts to the question?
I, I have an unpopular opinion because my life been the same. In 2008, it was the same. In 2016, it was the same. And 2020 was. The last week for me has been really on my practice of grace. The self work continues. Being very close to the communities that I'm a part of, really just being of value is how I've gotten through the week. Hanging out with friends where we're in service. Shout out to University. The work that they're doing over there. Like I put myself in those spaces. I live with an older woman. Shout out to Ma. And so she's watching the news all the time. And so I get enough of it from her in a sense where I get to connect and disconnect at the same time. Because I think, being aware of what's around you is important. But then being self-aware is even more important. And so for me, just like I was saying on Friday, like it ain't the people, it's the system. People is up in hooplas about the system, not really so much. So I can't really get into that. Even with my own grandmother, like, she was like, "Are you gonna vote?" And I'm like, I hear you. I appreciate your comment, but I don't necessarily want to talk about it. And she was kind of bothered by that. And so when the news came out, I actually spoke to her yesterday because of Alex Trebek passing. And so my grandmother's watched that before I was born. So basically, and so I, hit her up for that. She didn't even know. She was so wrapped up in the election, which I thought was interesting. And so as I was trying to steer the conversation toward Jeopardy, she was steering it toward the election. And so that was my only real interaction with it. No one runs it or rules my life. I pray to my ancestors. I like to practice daily meditation. I like to get into myself and get resolved. Because at the end of the day, if I am right with me and the things that I'm doing, I trust that I attract all that is for my highest good. And that's the message that I spread to other people. Because as other people talked about, the emotional angst, the emotional appeals, the emotional tug of war that's happening, projected by the media, projected by fear, projected by the past, projected like you talked about, filled nostalgia. I ain't getting into it. Like I won't get into it. And so that's what my week has been, gracefully allowing people to navigate this time as they need to, be of value in the ways that I can, be of support in the ways that I can with the capacity that I have.
Word. Definitely appreciate you. How about you, Mike? How's the week been for you? Reflecting a few days later. I don't even know if it's been a few days yet, right? So, what are your
Yeah,
thoughts?
yeah. Doesn't feel like it's ended yet, right? Uh, I'll say this: like, I haven't voted since 2008. Uh, my first like adult like reaction to an election was 2000 with Al Gore and the hanging Chad, right? And just being like, well, this system obviously doesn't work. Followed by John Kerry, supposed to be this Democratic savior, and me thinking, who the fuck is John Kerry, right? So and then Obama came along. It's like, okay, this is something. I can get excited about this. And then like 4 years into Obama, and like things are like the same. And so 2012 came, and I didn't vote. So I did vote this year, right? That's not to say anything that anyone that didn't feel like they wanted to participate in the system. I saw a lot of elitism coming out this term, where everybody, if you don't vote, you're somehow less of a citizen, or you're letting people down. And I think that's the wrong narrative to push, because if people can see that a system doesn't work for them, why should they push a vote into it? Uh, my experience for hearing it get called, I was at the gym in Ardmore, and I was leaving, and I'm driving through Bala Cynwyd, right? So it's all these affluent white homes, upper middle class. They all have Biden Harris signs, and they're all out on their front lawns with like noisemakers and stuff. And all I could think is, they're not even just excited about losing Trump. They're excited about getting Biden. And that is not something that I can attach to. And that's not anyone that's like privy to how this system works isn't going to attach to Biden, right? There's not, I don't feel any hope. I don't feel any excitement. I feel that under Democrats, nothing has improved for minorities, no matter what the narrative is. People love saying that Clinton made economics great for the Black community. That's not true if you look at the numbers. People like to say that Obama like helped out with the Black community, but like if you look at things like prison population, or look at things like the economics again, it didn't benefit. So I don't feel the excitement, but I'm not going to get in the way of other people's excitement, because it has been a long week. So I'm going to let people feel the joy that they can feel. And the biggest thing that I took out of it was that Obama was a moment of representation, right? Our new vice president elect is a moment of representation, right? So that is something. And in Biden's acceptance speech, he purposely talked about the African American community. He's probably the first. He's probably the first ever president elect to mention the transgender population in his acceptance speech. He's probably the first ever president elect to you mentioned the disabled population in his acceptance speech. So like things like that are like things I can get behind. But overall, man, it's like you said, it's the new same. It's the new same.
Word. So I think, and for me, it was one of those weeks where I voted for the first. Well, my daughter voted, right? I did the mail in because State Rep Joanna McClinton, I had her on the show some months ago, and she was like, consider it, at least get the mail in vote. And so I got the mail in vote, and I just had it here. My daughter was here, and I was just like, you know what? Let her fill it out, because then I feel like I'm not attached to the nastiness of the process that is voting, in my opinion. And so she filled it out and mailed it in, but I didn't get that warm fuzzy feeling that a lot of people say that you get, right? If you look on social media, they, I was expecting the ancestors to come up, like that in that picture with Kamala Harris with the Kangol on, and I think they got Harriet, and they got Maya, and they got who didn't have any spades? Shirley Chisholm. She ain't had no spades in her hand in that picture, right? And it's an awful picture. If you guys go to Mark Lamont Hill's page if you want to see the picture I'm talking about. But I was expecting like chariots, and I was expecting to have these warm fuzzy feelings, and I just didn't have them, right? And they talk, people were like, this is, your civic duty. And for me, it was just this idea of, I know what this system is. I know what this system represents. And so I've always had difficulty with it. I definitely, as a social worker, I understand the idea of harm reduction, right? I understand the idea of harm reduction, but a part of me was felt good about the last 4 years just because the covert racism from the Obamas, from the Clintons, from the Bushes, and so on and so on, it was brought to the forefront. Like I like my racism where I can see it front and center, right? Instead of it being happening behind doors and I might see it in the policy and I have to have good critical thinking skills to be able to recognize what systemic and institutionalized racism looks like, unlike some of my brethren who don't necessarily can't necessarily see it, right? So we got that racism from the Proud Boys, from Trump and his appointees, DeVos, and all of these. I got to see it, and I don't know if we would be where we are first without COVID when we talk about this idea of quote unquote progress, and even that's bullshit in my opinion. But I don't think if we didn't have Trump that we would truly be where we are. We would be at the status quo with Hillary Clinton, right? And it would go on and on and on. And this is what it is. Me reflecting, I understand why people need hope. People need, because if you don't have hope, what do you have, right? And so, me personally, I don't need hope. That's not what drive. And it, damn. Now I feel like I got to work that out of my head a little bit more because now it's just like, why am I a social worker, right? Because I do believe in people's propensity to change. But I also recognize that it's not hope alone that can cause the change that we desire to see. And I know for some people, this is all they have. All they have is that ballot, or that's the perception that they have, is that all they have is this ballot to truly enact some type of change, right? When people like, you didn't vote, how you gonna have a voice? I'm like, go look at what took place over the summer. Voting didn't take place until Tuesday. If you want to see some different changes that have taken place on local levels, right? It was the people in the streets, the people who you might villainize because they didn't vote. Nah, they've been doing this work for a very long time, right? And so I'm not going to denigrate anybody because they choose not to participate in a system that was never created for us, right? And even with Biden, even with I see Harris, Kamala, it's a little nasty to me. I'm gonna be honest. I understand the appropriate, what representation means, but even to a certain extent, I feel like, but I've never followed her like that. So I see Mary J. Blige, I see the AKA symbols on blast, and I see this sort of pandering to a community, right, for votes, and I understand it, right? I get it, but for me, it's just I see why y'all dancing in the street, and that's why I wanted to bring you all in today. I see why y'all dancing in the street, but the dancing has to stop. It must stop, right? I don't even think you could it's not a let's see how long we can dance for. No, it must stop, and we must get back to the business. And so that brings us to my first question for you all. What do you envision society, in particular Black America, to be? What it will look like under a Biden-Harris regime? And I guess I'll throw it to you first, Charles.
It's an interesting thing. I don't want to disagree, but I think we gotta dance a little longer. Just from the psychological trauma that has gone on, over the last 4 years, that, like you said, that has been unearthed. We have, racism has been at the forefront, right? You have been able to see your racism. As I passed the Starbucks on Saturday as I'm going for my ride, there was a group of white men and sitting with the American flags on their shirts, and just the stigma around that. I was like, y'all plotting, right? Because y'all mad right now. And I think that there still has to be somewhat of a symbolic release. But if we're going to talk about what does Black America look like under a Biden-Harris administration, I think it begins to look like what Stacey Abrams is doing down in Atlanta, what community organizers are doing around the country. It is ensuring that our franchisement, our ability to exercise this power is there, because we're seeing what Black communities around the country have done to get us to this point. And so if we think that we're going to, if we're going to move Mitch McConnell out of the way, who, you know, Trump leaves, now becomes, if they hold power, is still the most powerful man in the country. And he's shown that time and time again, right? The court, which is around policy. And I don't believe in symbolic natures of gestures. I've never been one, like, you know, to say, hey, you know, that we should be continuing to advocate for monuments coming down, because what happens when monuments come down, policies are made. Republican legislatures that have majority control around the country have said, you know, that's fine. You want to fight about monuments coming down. We're going to create policies that continue to marginalize and denigrate people of color. And so what I would like to see is more of us running for office, and the diversity, us as a people getting behind, whether it's financially supportive, social capital that continues to move people into positions of power. That it looks like us advocating for each other instead of saying, you know what, I don't like you, I don't like this policy, I don't like what you're advocating for. How do we get behind each other as a collective group? And I even got on my mother tonight because she used the term minority. I was like, you're a Black woman, you're not a minority, right? I can't stand that, right? We are people of color, right? Minority is a less than term, and people continue to use that term as in a pejorative term to say that you're still less than minority, all right? And that has been ingrained in my mother, who's 80 years old. She turns 80 on Wednesday, to still say that. And I don't think anyone had ever corrected her in saying the word minority, because that's how she identified. I want to see people of color, what's the word that I want to say? Never use that term minority again to associate themselves with anything, right? And to correct people, anybody that says minority in a sentence, to correct them very quickly. I am not a minority. I am a person of color. I am a Black man. I wake up Black and male every day. There is nothing less than about me. So that is, and I could go on with a diatribe, but that's just the initial thinkings of what I want to see Black folks and people of color on down the spectrum, wherever you sit on the intersectional spectrum, to be able to thrive.
I'm not sure what happened, Charles. You started to cut out. But while we figure out what's happening with
You
Charles, yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody want to respond to anything that Charles has said thus far, or respond to the question? Again, this a conversation. Like we here. We ain't got to be. We can pretend the cameras is off. You know what I mean? If we got to pull the gloves out, we got to pull the gloves out.
Yeah, I hear that Charles needs you to continue to dance a little bit. I hear that you have personally been traumatized by what's happening, and there might be people in your general vicinity that you communicate with that have also experienced the psychological trauma. Me, for instance, though, I also identify as Black, but I don't have a similar experience as you. So it becomes very, I'm gonna use the word dangerous to begin using these terms of us when talking about Black people, because the only thing that really truly makes us and us is the fact that we have the same oppressor in this American government, right? There are many different forms of us. And I think that is what needs to happen under any regime. It was happening under Trump. It will continue. Like everything that you mentioned that Stacey Abrams did. I love Stacey. She did it under Trump. So it doesn't like make it better to do it under Biden, Harris. I do understand, like you said, Phillip, about having like this sense of relief, like now I can move, and that feeling of now I can move, but understanding that whatever gorilla was you feeling, it wasn't a real thing. It's in the mind, right? And I always think about the mind, and I think about Bob Marley, and he said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. So any of the change that we're experiencing is because of the way that we are thinking about our environment and what is possible to do, and then needing a if this, then that. And if we can get rid of this, if this, then that, we can just move. We're always waiting for the perfect conditions to move. And I get it. I get that, many people, again, the media, I blame the media for a lot of things. And that's my own personal beef and vendetta in regards to like just the narrating of messages. What my vision for Black people, regardless of whether it happens, whoever is in the presidency, I believe that Black people get to start to identify themselves and start making movements outside of this collective think, understanding that we need to spread out, that we need to like stop being so concentrated in these cities so that we can actually make progress. There's so much land out here. There's so like as much as we're concentrated in cities, we're being still enslaved, and understanding like we're keeping those systems going that we are trying to disintegrate. So we have to remove ourselves from the systems. We're upholding these systems. I'm hoping that Black people recognize the systems that they're upholding and decide to withdraw themselves from it and create their own in these communities of like-minded individuals, and it not necessarily being a skin color thing. The Blackness of things, like I always ask Black people, is like, what makes you Black? And if you can really understand that outside of your skin color, then you're not defining yourself how someone else defined you, right? You can now self-identify and figure out what it is that you are as an individual and how you can find those like-minded people. So that's how I'm hoping things work under whoever is the leader of the country, because it like the system doesn't work. It works for who it works for, and it's a bad foundation. And to keep trying to like building a house on a bad foundation, it's going to keep sinking in. So we need to like chuck it. That's me. I'm on some like chuck it. Let's do another constitutional convention. Let's come together where we really have representation, where I'm writing down policy and not just trying to fix the policy that you guys have already put in place that's just not working. So.
Word. First, I think you might have stole my post because I've been writing about foundation like the last week or so. Nah, I'm playing. No, I completely agree. I think what you're talking about, and it goes to a even larger conversation, is about this idea of imagination, right? And imagining something different, because when we think about imagination, it's usually stripped from us, right, at a very young age. I think about this idea of art and being creative, in coloring and drawing. Unless you're like the guy Justin Watlington back here, who has one eye and drawing pictures of Biggie, unless you have that type of talent, you can no longer color. You can no longer create in that vein. You need to go find find something else to do. Right. And so we find different ways to strip the imaginations from people. So I definitely agree that, and I'm along the same lines. It took me a minute, right, to get to the point of undoing how I've been conditioned to think when it comes to folk that look like me, or other disenfranchised and marginalized populations. I'll go to you, Mike. What about you? What do you envision for between 20 and 2024 out here in these Biden-Harris streets?
Well, I'll say this. Biden-Harris won the election, right? Nothing's been done about the cops that murdered Walter Wallace. So it hasn't affected that, right? If anything, the city of Philadelphia purposely used the election and the timing of it to kind of sweep it, right? They purposely waited until November 4th to release the body cam footage because, like Jazz was saying, like the news cycle took over, right? So like it's the Biden-Harris presidency isn't going to change that. Like I don't want to sound negative, but I'm going to name the things that Biden-Harris aren't going to bring to the table. They're not going to come forward in a way that's really going to be an economic advancement for the Black and brown communities out there, because they're not going to touch reparations. That's not going to happen. They're not going to go anywhere near the police. It's not going to happen. Fundamental changes in our policing system is not going to happen from the president level. It's not going to happen from the federal level. They can put all kinds of little stipulations about trainings and things that people need to do. The police is a racist institution that will continue to punish Black and brown people at an unequal and disproportionate rate. They will, unless we continue to work. And you brought up dancing, right? And when I kept looking through social media, right, and I kept seeing who's dancing, I kept thinking about who isn't there dancing right now? Who doesn't have the ability to go there and dance? Who's working 2 jobs trying to like feed a family and living in like areas of the city that have just been completely left behind? Like the poverty map's not going to change in the city of Philadelphia during the Biden-Harris regime. That's not going to happen. Those ultra concentrations of poverty are going to stay exactly the same. The only way we change those kinds of things is by doing the work. And I'm also like you in the fact that, like, as much as I hated Trump, right, it sparked something. And speaking as like a white man who tries his best to be an ally, the white libs that have been showing up in like performative wokeness, guess what? They're gone. They ain't going to be showing up to marches. They ain't going to be doing social media posts because they got what they wanted. They think they already got a victory, but they have no idea what oppression even fucking looks like. And that is what I'm most scared about over the next 4 years, is that people will continue to dance because the Trump presidency never really affected them. It just gave them a really good social media platform. That's how I feel. And maybe it won't be. But if people don't continue to go out in the streets, nothing will change. Simple as that.
Word. How about you, Coach D?
I just want to say y'all better work. Finger snap all around. They better work. Cause NFS, if you know what that is, no funny shit. The hood didn't change under Obama, it didn't change under Clinton. I'm from the hood, and I'm proud to say that. I know Black kids that have lived in the projects, and I know Black kids from the Jecks, and there's a difference. You know what I mean? And so, what I envision when I see Black America um, in the next 4 years, I'm gonna take out the whole Biden and Harris thing because same script, different cast. Um, but what I'm seeing at what I'm seeing now and what I foresee is a lot of young artists, entrepreneurs, queer family, and folk really stepping out on themselves. Because honestly, COVID was a blessing for people who already had a foot on their neck. Because now there's other foots on other necks, and y'all like, oh, that hurt. Like, oh, that doesn't feel comfortable. Nah, we good though. We good on this side because we've been going through that. And it gave people like myself, going back to the comment earlier from Jazz, like-minded individuals, time to go in, a time to bet on oneself, a time to, vibe high, if you will, because we lived in the worst. We lived the worst, right? I remember there was an episode in Boondocks where Huey was coming at Granddad and was like, yeah, Granddad, you talk like you was out there getting hosed. And, I'm a survivor of police brutality twice. Like, go check my case files. And so, like, to be someone that is in those stories, that is from direct ancestry of slaves, there's not a lot of that. I think dismantling white and white privilege has to happen just as much as we dismantle Black. Because I definitely agree with Jazz in the sense that it's so layered now. Back in the 60s when my grandmother's time, the main thing that separated Black folk was religion. But now what separates us is everything, right? Information is everywhere and everyone has license because there's visibility to be more. And so I think, what I see is what I've been seeing is people on the ground level, like I said, University, Peace Players, Shockadelic Photography, Whip Series, arts by Antonia G, like Bishop the Barber, like people just coming out and just octopus hands, doing everything from writing to art to shout out to Hood Market and Conscious and Bonfire Radio, like just so many people that are like betting on themselves and finding that support. And just like I've been saying on Friday, it's the self, it's not the system. Again, back to what Jazz was saying, to echo that message, free yourself from mental slavery. We all have that option when we are not, dependent on something that's salvific, if you will. You know what I mean? In the sense that it lives outside of us, knowing that it doesn't work. To me, that sounds like bad ointment. You know what I mean? It sounds like a drug habit where it's like, I'm searching for this feeling. You know what I mean? I'm a big fan of the Avatar. And so Uncle Iroh, he talked about hope and the Avatar, and they talk about hope being a fearful lie, you know, to the body, and the body just hoping it to be wrong. You know what I mean? And sometimes I think hope can be a little like purgatory. You know, I believe that faith without work is dead. And so that's what I see. I see a lot of people just doing the work, doing the self work, crying the tears that they never cried. I'm seeing young Black men do yoga on a basketball court. I'm seeing people in Canada and Vegas and Cali and Virginia breathe. Like, just take the time to breathe. I'm seeing 80-year-old Black folk look at their diet. And I think that's what it is. That's going to spark that change. And it's not going to happen now. It's a seed. And so what I see is an orchard. I see an orchard of people just seeing themselves, loving themselves better, so that way they're not dependent on something outside of them. And I see so many Black folk doing it, so many brown folk doing it, so many non-binary folk doing it, so many non-racial conforming folk doing it. And so that's how I see America and within the next 4 years, just continuing to grow, continuing to plant seeds.
Word, word. I definitely appreciate your everybody's thoughts on that question, and I guess that brings me to my next question when it comes to this idea of Black liberation that we're talking about, and I think a few of you might have touched on it briefly, but just this idea of, can individualism coexist with collectivism, or does it have to take a back seat? Right. And so what prompted that question for me is where we are in society. You know, it's a, I mean, everything is attention seeking, right? The very nature of social media, no matter if you're doing great works or not, and posting that on social media, it's rooted in attention seeking behavior, right? And so it's a look at me, right? And so can this look at me attitude that, especially, and I don't want to say a lot of our young people, because I don't know a lot of our young people. I know the people that I see, that I come in contact with, where it's this idea of, I got to get at the bag, right? Even though, even this idea of, you know, generational wealth, it's still rooted in me, not necessarily us attempting to change the financial trajectory of a community, right? So I wanted to get your all your thoughts on that. I see you with you got a smirk, Jazz. Is that a smirk? Like, you right? Matter of fact, now I'm gonna go to Dr. Charles first. I'm gonna let you wait, because I saw the smirk. I didn't know. I'm gonna give you a chance to simmer for a second. You know what I mean?
Let Jazz go, bro. Let Jazz go.
Let Jazz go. All right, go ahead, Jazz. You up first.
Um, wow, I was smirking. What's coming up for me? So when we start talking about collectivism, individualism, first of all, no, individualism should never take a back seat. You described something that was different from individualism, more of a narcissistic approach to movement, which is different from individualism. And I think that cult, when I say collectivism, is akin to cults. Okay, and we know what happens when people make movements in cult. They tend to lose self and give allegiance, blind allegiance, over to the group and what the group says, and that is dangerous. I believe at all times it is dangerous when you give allegiance over to something else larger than you. I believe that we need to identify what are our personal values, and then when you talk about making change for your community, know who your neighbors are. Like, we need to start simple. We make it so hard. Like, we're talking about all of this usness and everything, but your us is about people that you don't even really know. Get to know who is in your, who are the people in your neighborhood. Like, it's really simple. So that we can actually make change together in our neighborhoods, in our communities. What is your community? We talk about community all the time and the community all the time. And then I feel really excluded, actually, when I go to these community events and I'm like, oh, but nobody really understands who it is that I am, what my values are. You're assuming a lot of things based on my exterior, based on my titles. And we need to take time to really know who it is that I am, do that self-work, to understand what are my values, what makes me move forward, and then join up with people, create tribes that can be stronger and stronger and stronger. Collective, no. no, it's not going to work. It never works because there's no true collective, and if there is, there's always some leader. Any kind of co-op, there was somebody that created it that the people are giving allegiance over to. It just doesn't work for a long term, and it doesn't work on the scale that we are in this country, right? We need to like really get back to the Republican of things, where we're like having small agreements and understanding what's going on in the states. Like, our foundation was fucked. That's all I have to say. Is like, our foundation, it was cute for then, it doesn't work all of these years later, and we really need to look at that and how we're still trying to make it work, and it's not working. It's like a bad relationship. We need to get out.
Word. So I'm gonna go to you, Dr. Charles, and I guess I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. So this idea of, if we're going away from this idea of individualism versus collectivism, and we're going towards this idea of a super enhanced, focused on self versus community, is that better, Jazz? You like that better? Is that work a little bit?
That super enhanced focus on self is like narcissism, which is different from individualism, right? Individualism is understanding your core values and making movements based on that. To me, there's like, I can't understand what could be wrong with understanding what my core values is, and then making movements on that and joining with people that make those agreements. But we have to start small. That's what people are afraid of, is like just starting over and starting small. Yeah. Now, I completely agree with you that a lot of what's happening is this like super self-absorbed me movement. That is not going to work either. You know, it's a balance in between that. But thank you for that.
No, you know why I stray away from this idea of narcissism? Just because as a therapist, in the white medical model, right? It's hard. Like, I see it on Facebook, it grinds my gears. And again, that's a form of conditioning that's taking place, right? What we talk about, you need to have certain titles in order to attribute these specific words to it. But I think that's part of the fabric of our society, right? And how we move and how we operate. And I know I saw you shaking your head, Dr. Charles. Like, it's hard for me to just, it's hard for us to throw out, the narcissism word, just because, we feel like I've got to make sure that all the characteristics are there. And I know.
Okay.
Get it. No. I know, but I think that's why I keep trying to find alternative words, because I know when it comes from me, how it's framed in its usage, it's from that dumbass book called the DSM, right? So what about you, Dr. Charles, and this idea of self-absorbedness and how that impacts our ability to connect with one another as a community?
I mean, it's a good question. Narcissism is a personality disorder. What we just watched for the last 4 years is a personality disorder. We watched narcissism play out. When I think about individualism and collectivism, I think about this podcast that I've been listening to. The podcast is called Roll On with Rich Roll. And I was listening to Jay Shetty talk about, your success is built upon the depths of your service towards others. And so when I think about collectivism, I think about this collective movement of people being in service of each other. And that's what I would like to see, like that we spend time, what you do each week, what you do each night, here on Rhetorically Speaking, is in service of others. It brings the collective together to listen, to hear, to think, to inspire, to cultivate. And that's what collectivism is. Right? Collectivism is that opportunity to bring a group of people, a community, a culture together to be in service of each other. And so I think that individualism does have a backseat. I think individualism is antithetical to what our communities have thrived for longer periods of time. You think about what we've had to do for decades, for centuries, about how do we take care of our communities. Before desegregation, it was a collectivist mindset. We had to take care of each other. We had to educate our children. We went and served in religious unity with each other. And so I think that part of that has gotten away. We think about the social culture, the social media aspects that play out. It is me, me, me. But you see those who are in service of others who have a greater impact, right? Have a greater impact on the larger writ of society. It's those who are me, 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 who are not having that impact, who we cannot say are having this greater impact on moving a community. And so I think, in my opinion, that we have to move individuals out of the way. It is a capitalistic mindset. And so if we go back to, we think about what it means to bring our communities together, not galvanized around one person, but galvanized around a community of people. We have elders. We have elders who have shaped our communities. We listen to them, but they are looking for the younger generation to step up, right? To keep our communities intact, to build them even stronger. And so we have to continue to push inwards to continue to make sure that the fabric of our communities are still strong, and that we're not saying go out and forget us. It's coming back into these communities and actually working even harder.
Word. Anybody have any other thoughts on this subject
Yeah,
matter? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I get behind the idea of when you just mentioned, Charles, about individualism, especially in this country, definitely being like a capitalistic tool, right? I should only care about me. I need to get mine. Everything about our system does its best to destroy collective and destroy community, and instead parcel us all out into our individual worlds where we don't interact with each other anymore, right? But at the same time, I don't want to lose the idea of individual talents, individual expression of self, individual gifts, right? We still bring our sense of self to these collective experiences. And I think this is kind of what Jazz was hitting on, is that we can't lose ourselves in the collective, but we also can't lose ourself completely. Like, we need to be able to bring it in to such a degree that it doesn't destabilize the collective like force that we're trying to be a part of. Kind of like I was at last Saturday, I was at a protest in West Philly against the police execution of Walter Wallace. And at one point, this guy that was there, was a black guy, and he's probably like mid-60s, right? And at one point, he had his own microphone out of nowhere and a speaker in his backpack, right? So he took this opportunity to kind of co-opt the movement that was going on to make it all about voting, right? Which was not the purpose of that protest that day. It was not about voting. It was not about focusing on Trump and Pence. It was about focusing on a black man whose life was taken at the hands of the Philly police, right? So at that moment, what happened was the collective, the BLM organizers, sought to restrain that individual act, right? To protect the collective force that was trying to
allegedly. I got to throw out allegedly. No, I'm just saying, I'm trying to cover myself. I don't want to get no lawsuits. You know what I mean? So I got to throw out allegedly.
Okay. I got you. All right. But that's kind of like this balance we walk, right? Because when we want, you kind of hit on this at first, Phil, is that when we want the spotlight, there's a good chance we're destabilizing the collective force. But when we just want to bring our gifts and our talents to the table, we're strengthening that collective force. And I think
and that's what that's what I said. I said we bring our talents to be in service of others. Like, what we're doing right now is bringing our collective talents to be in service of others. Those who are listening tonight are being fed. And so
and I wasn't denying that you didn't hit on that. I just wanted to echo that idea, because it kind of played along with what Jazz was talking about and what you were talking about. It just seemed to be the thread that connected them both.
Right.
I think we can have both, but it's a delicate balance, and it depends on the atmosphere of the collective. What are we doing to make sure that as a collective, we're still inclusive, right? How do I reach those white libs that are going to disappear without completely scaring them off? Because listen, I lean left in the way that it scares people that are on the left, right? And I can't bring that to like centrist white libs and expect them to listen and want to get involved and grow their base. So there's that balancing act we got to bring.
Word, word. Coach D, you had thoughts on it, or you want the next question to start off with? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I'll start off with the next question. There's been a lot of thoughts on this, so I'm all for the forward move.
So, and this one has to do. I know somebody spoke about this idea of capitalism, and I think it gets conflated with this idea of financial freedom within the community, right? We see it a lot of times with the amongst the entertainment folk. You know what I mean? And so this idea of saving Black America through uh, through financial. I'm sorry, I'm laughing just because I'm thinking about the idea of financial literacy and saving Black America through financial literacy, who has 1/10 the wealth of white folk, right? And so just this idea of overall idea of financial freedom. What are your thoughts just on that topic at hand?
Well, first I do want to say this. I will say this. I just wanted to bring out my coloring book because earlier you were talking about imagination.
No word. That's dope.
So I actually I was mad excited about it. So now I get to show the world. So I bought an ABC coloring book from the Sesame Street, and it's like an advanced copy. Whatever. Just going back to imagination. Just want to encourage anybody that's watching. We talking about heavy stuff, but the child in me lives, plays freely. I dance in the street. I thank God, and I shout and I color. You know what I mean? I jump rope, I skip. I think we get to free ourselves from the story that we can't do those things. I mean, me personally, living a fearless life, as I think Oprah said it. You're gonna disappoint some people, and so just getting back to that with all that's being said, yeah, we still get to be free and still imagine if that's what you choose to do. If you really say, "Hey, I want to imagine," then we get to do that. And going back to financial freedom, I think it's the same thing. I'll just talk about me personally. I can't speak for nobody else. I think it's about education, and that's a duality. One, unlearning the ways that if you are from poverty, because I think that's a thing, right? Again, speaking that Black is not monolithic, um, there's a lot of layers in that. And so when Black people hear, "Oh, the Black dollar is this," but Black people only own that's also subjugated, because then you have Black people that understand business, you have Black people that understand taxes, and Black people that don't. As I said, I know a Black kid that lived in the projects, and I know a Black kid from the Jecks. So I think it's really about education, and not education on capitalism or education on how to make money fast. Because again, those are both fear based and ego driven, but really just understanding literacy, understanding money, and looking at it as a game. So again, back to that dual learning, trauma, relationships with money. There's a lot that's different for people. Jazz touched on it earlier, in terms of Blackness. Like, again, you have Black people that know what it's like to live their entire lives with $30,000 a year. And you have Black people that know what it's like with 60,000, and those two, they can't relate. And so I think it's really about having the dexterity to, one, identify what your relationship is, and then two, then moving on this individual plane. Healing starts at home. I think that's a major issue, and I think that's an American disease that's in everybody. I don't care, Black, white, orange, yellow, or whatever. We want to go and help the world instead of helping ourselves, and then feel better about the help we do in the world instead of healing ourselves. Not knowing that just in part by healing ourselves, we're healing the world. And so once we identify that relationship and identify that need, then we move to educate ourselves, educate a different story. Imagine what life will be. I have a friend that is always talking to me about visualization. I know my relationship with money, being a kid that grew up in the projects, money was scarce, and it took me years to even admit that. You know what I'm saying? And so I literally grew up learning how to live without money, like the root of all evil. And so I think, again, getting back to how we get to devise that plan on an individual level, then on a community level, and then on a plan for all people. I think really dismantling this whole Black white shit is the answer, because it's just not real. It's really not real. So when it comes to capitalism, I would say the same thing. Educate yourself on what it means to be a capitalist, and put yourself in a position, yourself. Again, I have to exercise that point, but put yourself in a position to see something different for yourself, and then move, as the other gentleman said, to be in service for others. But I definitely think it starts at home.
Word. I guess the reason why I brought it up, and I was trying to find the guy's post because somebody came out with a book. You know, it's a book without a barcode, which is definitely still a viable book nonetheless. And it was about this idea of how, especially where we are in 2020, we continue to push this idea of generational wealth, um, and how it's been sold, no pun intended, as a bill of goods, right? And so when I think about it, I think about, you know, studies that show the socioeconomic class that you're born into is the one that you'll die in, right? And I don't know necessarily how much financial literacy is going to change that. When we talk about literacy and understanding money, how much is going to change that, right? So I guess that's one of the reasons why I posed it, because there's so many people who. Can you mute yourself for me, Coach D? Thank you. You know, it's a large segment of the population that believes that it's money that's going to change the ills that we face, right? So I wanted to bring that idea to the table. Not that it's not a tool, a viable tool for sure, right? But it's a lot of other factors that influence this idea of us getting the black liberation, right? Or in us this idea of black liberation. So anybody could jump in at this point.
Okay, cool. I wanted to respond to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the problem. I think that is the problem, that this idea of, the black dollar and generational wealth being this thing that is, like you said, me, like we said earlier, me. And so I don't think that this is going to happen in 4 years. I don't think, why white families and other, genres of people have this type of equity and we don't, is because they had access and experience. That's not going to change in 4 years. But before you get access or experience, you have to be knowing. And so if we're focused on money and we're not focused on understanding how to build and take time with things, having to really understand how to lose and how to win. Any billionaire I've listened to, a millionaire that I've listened to, they talk about that. They talk about wins and losses. They talk about gains and losses. And I think when we talk about black liberation, there's too many black folk that want it tomorrow without understanding that's a long ball game. And so that's why I stress really keeping it at home. Most people don't even have an end game. They just want money and they want their families. They don't even know what they want to build. They just don't want to be poor. And so I think that starts with the mindset, and that is where that education comes. So that way, black people or colored people, or however that happens in the next decade or so, really have some sort of foundation within themselves that's not centered around money per se, but really on some type of equity, skills, talent, and really understanding how to take that, monetize it, and really build something, as opposed to, because most people, like you said earlier, chasing the bag. That's not generational wealth. Most people don't really even understand that concept. So I'll stop there, but that was just my point. And like, it is a self thing. It is when I see other people and other families from other different type of financial backgrounds, it was a long game. It wasn't something that happened under a presidency. It wasn't something that happened in a short period of time. It took generations. That's why it's called generational wealth. But I digress.
One of the things that is important when we use the term Black liberation, right? So it's like being free, Black, Black freedom, Black. So I've read Isabel Wilkerson's book Caste. I don't know if any of you guys have read this book or seen it, but it talks about how, again, the construct, the social construct of Blackness, how that in itself is the issue. And we can't be liberated, at least we get down to the issue of the caste system that we're in. So no matter what we do to, if we use capitalism, if we use social, whatever it is that we use, if we're still inside of this caste system that in this country particularly is based on our skin color, because like he said, the curtain of my color, Jimmy B said that, it's like we can't move, we can't be liberated. So it really goes back to how it is that we're identifying. Now, when we talk about capitalism, this country was built based on capitalism, and we have to be careful that we don't repeat the mistakes of the colonizers, right? By coming in and needing to have low cost labor so that you can have this increasing wealth. Because it's really, really hard to build any type of wealth if you don't have, cost and ratio. We need to start really manufacturing our own goods. And again, getting back to this collective small communities where people have things in common and they're working toward a common goal. I like what was it Rick Ross? He bought some land. Some other people came together in Georgia and they bought some land. I'm thinking that people need to get together that are actually wanting to get together, not because of their skin color, but because of their innate values, and be able to create some land and then grow from there. So then you don't have to be involved in the system that is actually oppressing you. Like, in order to be a part of the capitalistic system and to grow, you have to be a part of the system that's oppressing us. That doesn't make sense to me. We need to pull ourselves away from that system so that we can then create and build our own. I believe that if our ancestors, and I'm talking about the civil rights ancestors, had to do all again, they wouldn't be fighting so hard for assimilation. Because that's what happened once all of they wanted the Jim Crow to go away, but they didn't want us in the 80s and to start assimilating and wanting to be like our oppressors. Like, that's what happened. And they did have a very good thing happening, Charles, you're right, before that, where they were coming together under the guise of religion and under these different things, because they were building smaller communities that were working collectively. We need to get back to that mindset.
I just want to say this, and thank you, Jazz, and Coach. It's just interesting. I love to be able to talk. This is not a fully formed thought, Phil. It's going to come out because I love to talk about the work that I do with Camelback Ventures. And so Camelback Ventures is an organization that was built by our wonderful CEO, Aaron Walker. And his goal was thinking about how do we create generational wealth for Black and Indigenous people of color. And so what we've done over the last 6 years is give a friends and family round of funding to Black and Indigenous people of color and women who are building ventures to enhance the lives of people of color and women. And so on the back end of this, Coach and Jazz, is that yes, we're funded, we're mainly funded by white philanthropy, but our hopes is by beginning the funding of entrepreneurs, people who are actually building ventures for us, that they in turn have the ability to create generational wealth, because entrepreneurship is the quickest way to generational wealth. And that ability to be in service of others, they have the ability to create, as we were saying, you create livable wage jobs for us. And so it's a hard role. And I work every day with people who are fervent in believing in what they do. Julio Rivera with Liberate, Elisa Hoffman with School Board School. I think about Kimberly Townsend with the Leadership School in St. Louis. All of these people are building ventures that are going to impact our communities. When I say our, I mean our communities. It's not an easy road. It is not an easy road. As Aaron, our CEO, thinks about creating and building a venture capital fund that just funds Black and Indigenous people of color and women, to help us create generational wealth. But I think we also have to define what generational wealth looks like. I think, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, when we say generational wealth, we're passing down millions of dollars to the next generation. Generational wealth could be those 5 or 6 houses that your dad bought you, that you have the ability to rent out, that allows you to pay your family's bills without you having to put any more of your funds your work into your living expenses. That's generational wealth, because you get to actually keep more money. So I think that we have to think about what that looks like. And the last thing I say, going back to you, Coach, is that the foundation of that is financial literacy and spending time and understand what money can do. How do we learn about the working aspects of money and what they can do what they can do if we're building ventures in our communities, and how do we continue to support them.
Well, appreciate you, Charles. I'm
I want to say this.
Go
My
ahead.
only caveat with anything that has to do with capitalism is making sure that I'm not contributing to the oppression of anybody else, right? So if I'm having a sneaker company, I'm making sure that I'm not creating slaves over in Cambodia. So like just really being mindful of how that system works in order for profit to be generated.
No, I totally agree. Livable wage jobs.
Word. Mike, I'm gonna go to you. I feel like you're prepared to answer this question as we get ready to wrap up. Man, we're going an hour and a half. I definitely appreciate y'all for taking time out. So, Mike, this for you. So how can allies on probation aid in this movement? So those of you who know me know, I don't like the term ally, right? I use the term ally on probation because you one thought away, right, from being right back on that other side, no matter how noble you are. Right, so I love my man Mike over there, right? But he's still an ally on probation because he could do one thing that shift them right back to the other side, man. So how can allies on probation just aid in this movement?
Yeah, allies on probation. You gotta trademark that, man. You gotta let's turn that into something.
Don't you do it first, Mike? You know what I mean? 'Cause then you gonna be feeling this.
We got this on. We got this recorded, man. It's protected. You're
All
good.
right, cool.
Yeah. I mean, like, since we're just talking about wealth, yo, hit up people's cash apps if you're white. Like, pass your money on. Like, straight up. Like, there's been so many crowdfunded movements over the last 6 to 9 months where I was able to donate directly to trans women of color, where I was able to donate directly to people that had just dealt with uh, police abuse, where I was able to donate directly and not through like GoFundMe. Like, I'm talking about hitting Venmo accounts, hitting Cash App accounts. Like, if people want to support this and be an ally, yo, man, funds are important. Like, buy black shit, support black artists, support people that like make your money show your involvement. And then also, like, to like my fellow like white people that want to be allies, like, move beyond the meme. Like, don't be just sharing memes all the time about movements. Like, share someone's work, signal boost. And if you're going to signal boost, fact check what you're signal boosting. Because some of these people get so caught up in their performance online that they just start sharing everything and they're not looking at what they're actually sharing. There's so many ways to signal boost and use your platform of privilege. And, like, as always, like, don't take up too much space. That isn't your role as an ally. Like, I saw very early on with the protests that were happening for Walter is that right away, white people at these protests were agitating the cops, instigating things. Like, they're to like make a name for themselves and get mixed into it. Like, that ain't your job. Like, white people at protests, you are there to use your body as a shield, to lend support, to lend energy. That is it. And if allies don't understand that, like, you don't have a right to show up at the movement. It's about making sure, like, when we were just talking about the individual and the collective, it is not my job as an ally to take up more space than I deserve. It is my job as an ally to show up and ask, what can I do?
Yeah.
How can I be of use? That's it. That's what allies need to do. Simple as that.
And so I'm gonna say this. I don't. I'll take your guilt dollars, right? I'll take your guilt dollars. Cash tag Quantify LLC. I'll take your guilt dollars, but that don't make you an ally. You know what I mean? Ally on probation, right? Because you feel guilty about whatever, right? I'll take it. I'll go spend it, right? But I don't, cause I've seen that. I've seen some groups pop up, right? Like, white people come here to donate money, right? And you just see them. I'm so sorry, right? Like, I legit saw this with my own eyes, and I'm like, all right, cool. Take the bread, I guess, right? It's blood money or what have you. But don't misconstrue that as you truly being an ally on probation. You know what I mean? Because there are folk who think that giving money, right? We look at the. I'm thinking about, you know, again, the wealthy folk, right? We think about, sports franchises, who people who've owned their stadiums, and they open up, for voting, right? That doesn't necessarily make you an ally because you open up your stadium that you own. Good job, right? You get a golf clap for that, but don't go around to your friends and black folks saying, "Oh, well, I did X, Y, and Z," when the rest of your movements, right, is not ally worthy, if that makes sense, right? So,
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, like, absolutely, with everything, intention matters. And this isn't, you don't get to have a one act move that makes you an ally on probation. You need to bring a complete set of attitudes, ideas, and behaviors to be an ally on probation. So I'm just focusing on certain things where, when you have the ability to move funds that you have to someone that needs them, like, you shouldn't be hesitating. Let me put it that way. You should be moving that money on in that kind of sense.
anybody else want to give their thoughts as we get ready to wrap up?
I did. I mean, I think what you said, Mike, has a lot of power, but also can be potentially dangerous, if people don't understand it. And I don't think a lot of people do. Um, when you talk allyship, I think of connection, because I know black people that aren't allies to black people. I know black people that aren't allies to trans folk, or black, middle class black or rich black ain't allies to blacks in poverty, or whatever the case may be. And so I think when we talk allyship, I think you're right. Intention is very, very big. But connection, how are you connected to this person? And then is that something that you're building off of, or are you just going out and, as it was said earlier, guilt money? And so I think really being an ally is about being connected. Again, it was said earlier, being in your community, like on your block, and reaching out to someone that you don't know. And I'm gonna go back again with mental health and mental awareness. To me, is self-awareness and education. Having dealt with white people who want to be my ally or want to be my friend, and their words have been harmful and their intentions didn't match their impact. I think allyship is about truly being connected, being aware, and then filling a need that's asked of you. And that may just be your presence, as you said. It may not necessarily be in dollars. Your intention goes a long way. Um, However, it doesn't if the impact isn't what it what it's intended to be. And so I think for a lot of allies, really understanding the intention and having a true, authentic connection with someone, regardless of where you're from, or what race you're from, is what allyship is. And I think that's how you get off of probation. Because I have white friends, or friends, rather, actually, they're not white. I have friends that don't look like me. And it's even strange for me to say, oh, I have white friends, because I don't see them as white. I have friends from Italy. I have friends, that or this or that or that. And so I think allyship is about connection, most importantly.
Appreciate you. This last question, we're gonna start with no, we're gonna save the dead minister for last. We're gonna start with you, Charles. So, what are some tangible strategies that individuals who are watching can do to assist in this change that's taking place?
You have some hard questions. um, I'm gonna be the psychologist right now. I think one thing, people have to take the opportunity to breathe. And listening to what Coach said earlier, and I don't want to steal if there's any thunder she was going to talk about. I think the ability for us to find a practice, a breath work, a meditation work, um, that allows us to be more resilient. This work is hard. Uh, the work that we all do, as we work through our communities, we work with our families, we do work on ourselves. Uh, Finding time to be in space alone with your breath, with your meditation, whatever your practice is, to find solace and resilience through times. I think also finding your tribe and spending more time with your tribes, even in COVID. I know we have been able to innovate in ways and that we communicate and spend time with our tribes. I think that if you can find new tribes um, to communicate with, to be in space with, to talk with, to find community, to find love, often allows us to let down even a little bit more as we get older. And as we get older, when you begin to move into your 50s and 60s and 70s, the research shows that the stronger your communities are, the better your health. And so I ask that people just figure out where your tribes are and spend more time cultivating them.
Thank you, Coach.
I would say the same thing. That's why they call me Coach D. I got 200, real quick, I'll tell you a story. I got 200 kids in the gym, but I only got 12 slots. And so I think not having the fear of just echoing what was just said, just not having the fear of knowing what your lane is, knowing what your role is, and playing that part and doing that with greatness. And again, just really having the just the self efficacy, to stand on who you are and who you get to be, and attract your tribe, attract your people that can, and then you amplify their message and they amplify yours, and so forth and so forth. I really, really do think when we talk about connection in that way, we're talking we're talking about building. You know what I mean? And so one day you might be my auntie, one day you might be my sister, one day you might be my cousin, but really building that community, building yourself, building your own identity, and like on any team, knowing what your role is on that team. A championship isn't won with one person. May have one talent or one exceptional talent, but even that one exceptional talent can't win the game by themselves. And so I believe it sounds cliche coming from the coach, but it's definitely a team effort. But even on that team, you gotta know that you can boogie. You gotta know your worth and what you bringing. He may have 30 points, but she got 15 rebounds, and if you don't get the ball, he can't score. And so once everyone knows that we're connected in our collective efforts, then we can truly get to the chip. So that's how I think we do that.
Thank you, Mike. How about you?
Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of echo here. I think one thing that we kind of talked about tonight that was kind of a theme is that this presidency really ain't gonna do much, right? So I think impact locally, simple as that. And I think kind of like what Charles said, like make that impact first with yourself, get yourself right, get yourself in a position to where you can make an impact. And then like look to your block, look to your neighborhood, look to how you can build something. Because I also believe what coach is saying is on point, is that we need to start fostering real connections with people, or else we can't build anything. You can't build anything without actually feeling together in that process. And I think we just really have to focus on like how we can make things better around us. Something that Charles kept saying about being in service to others, and I think that that is our best strength. And you just got to figure out what your lane is, and it doesn't have to be perfectly figured out, like Coach said. Because listen, I'm 34, I still don't know what my lane is. I might have a couple degrees, but I still don't know what my lane is. I'm still figuring that out. But we just have to make an impact in some way, in some fashion, and lift somebody up, even if it's just yourself on a daily basis. That kind of impact creates ripple effects in your neighborhood, and it can really bring about change.
Thank you, Minister Jazz. Preach your word.
So, first thing is to understand the places where you have been miseducated and do the work of re educating yourself, understanding where history has been convoluted to fit a certain narrative. The second thing is Black people get to start making their own narratives, making sure that the bottom stories, quote unquote, the bottom stories are told. A lot of the bottom stories of our past we don't know, and that's been a detriment to us because we don't know all of the beautiful successes that were there, so we only hear a very certain part of the narrative. We need to be able to know those stories. Make so you keep a journal, you write your stories, you do podcasting, you contribute to the media by understanding journalism, be media literate. The other thing is to do your homework and understand the areas where around the country they have been disaster capitalism, where they have withdrawn funds so that these places can have no equity, no money, and then this is how they gentrify. Find those places first. Find those places and start building. They have buildings that you can get really cheaply, and you can start doing things in neighborhoods outside of where you are right now. I think it's really important for us to start moving. Our ancestors, they moved from the south up west and the north and all these different places when it was time. It's time for us to start making those exactly buy and build the block, right? It's time for us to start making those movements outward, away from the large concentrations of cities. Why I'm really concerned about the concentrations of Black people in cities is because it makes it very easy to put circles around us, and it makes it very easy to be attacked. And when you're talking about a strategy of revolution, we need to be spread out, and we need to be able to have bases in other places. We also need to mix and have authentic conversations with people that are on the other side. Understanding where your line is, and being courageous to have these conversations so that we can understand where the places where we're more alike than different. And that was one of the messages of Martin Luther King Jr., but also Malcolm X at the end, before they assassinated him. It was just like, we need to start really crossing the line and having these deeper conversations. And so anytime that's available to you, understand why somebody voted the way that they voted, understand what their motivations are. And so then we can start making collective decisions, as opposed to, decisions that I think this is the way everybody should do it, because then that's when you have the animosity that we're continuing to have. And if we really truly want to have any type of liberation, we need to find the togetherness of things.
I appreciate you. I guess for me, I got a few things that keep popping into my head. Uh, I don't know if it's cliche or not, but heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? Like I think of myself, so I'm an adjunct professor at Dell State. I always used to say I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to be a professor, and now here I am as a professor, and it's one of the scariest things that I've ever experienced as a professional. Just because this idea of trusting myself, right, and trusting the skills that I bring. I asked for this, right? It's something that I purposely sought out, and so I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I think for me, where I am is that I struggle with, and Mike and I were talking about this prior to coming on. I teach at a HBCU, and this I see the what they consider skill deficits, right? What society would consider skill deficits when it comes to things like writing and what have you. And it's difficult navigating these ideas of white supremacy and what have you that all went into them showing up the way that they're showing up and still being there with the job to do. And so I say that to say that offering your skills and your talents still in the midst of trying to navigate these systems is not an easy task, right? It's difficult, but it's worth it, and you have to, right? I have no choice. I have no choice but to uh to challenge these students on a daily and weekly basis, still showing grace and understanding, but still recognizing what they need to not only be successful in the social work profession, but what they need, that helping them hone the skill sets that'll be beneficial, and that is beneficial as we again attempt to create the world that we want to see for us as community. I know I said a lot right there, but just this idea of trusting self, right? And from trusting self, you have to understand and learn self. Like Mike said, I'm learning something new about myself. I try to on a daily basis, and it's both the positive and it's the unhealthy things, right? And so the more we can have knowledge of self and then being able to show up and use our skills, not necessarily offering all of ourselves, but using our skills and our talents to contribute to community and others. I think again we'll be all better off for it. Listen, man, I appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all. I know it's an hour and a half. Again, this, Charles, I think you said it about this idea of, and I just wanted to, yeah, whatever, man. This ain't nothing, right? I just come on here, but I was listening to I was listening to Dr. Carr. You know what I mean? He talked about Karen Hunter and how this show is just about information and just getting it out there. And this is what, no matter if it's 2 people that are listening or 100 people that are listening, right? This is not only, I mean, fuck combating the narrative against whatever they saying, but this is informing and edifying us, right? So I appreciate you all for coming on. You've definitely added some value to not only rhetorically speaking, but to me as a person. And I'm gonna leave here and I'm gonna reevaluate some things, and because again that's what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to push back, and we're supposed to push back with love. Um, Sometimes a little strong love, you know what I mean? But we got to push back with love, no doubt. So thank you all once again. So real quick, if you want to give out your identifying information, feel free. How people can follow you on these different sites. So we can start with you, Jazz.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I really enjoyed connecting with each of you tonight. You can find me, wearemuchdifferent.com, and it's Minister Jazz, MINISTA JAZZ. Wearemuchdifferent.com.
Thank you. How about you, Coach?
Bless. So yeah, I definitely want to thank you, Philip. Thank everybody that's here and their thoughts and their perspective. Definitely going to reevaluate and reflect. Get back to resolve and ease. So if you want to link up with me and join that movement, www.getfitflyright.com. At Get Fit Fly Right on every social media site. Coach D, Dama Williams on Facebook. Follow me. Let's link up. And so again, I thank you. I'm grateful, and many blessings to everybody.
No doubt. How about you, Charles?
Brother, it's always a pleasure to be in space with you, man. It is definitely a blessing, brother, and grateful to spend this platform with everybody else on the show tonight. Gratitude to you all and the tremendous work that you are doing. Um, I just give a shout out to the What's Your Revolution show. You can find it on any podcast medium. What's Your Revolution with Dr. Charles Corprew. Twitter is WY Revolution. Instagram and Facebook are What's Your Revolution. So look forward to hearing everybody. And please continue to support this brother in his movement. He is a wonderful voice for all of us, and I am grateful to be in his tribe.
Thank you. How about you, Mike? You about to give him the
I don't have
Instagram?
anything.
I'm about to
No,
say you
I
gotta
don't
spell
got.
out your
I
Instagram
got.
name.
I don't have anything like that for a follow. I love participating in this. Since I first got to, since Phil first came up to me at the Moonlight meeting and said, "Listen, I hold this men's group, and I get a whole lot of brothers that show up. I could use a brother or two." Since that day, it has been a boon to my existence. Really, I love participating in this. You can just catch me next time he has me come out and talk.
No doubt, no doubt. And as always, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Shout out to all the people that are tuned in. Zakia, who's upstairs. You there, you got to shout out. Shout out to the people who are watching on YouTube. Shout out to Janine, Victoria. I appreciate you all for watching. I'll be back tomorrow night on my solo tip, because it is some ish that went down that I do got to get off my chest for about a 35-minute rant. So tune into that tomorrow on Rhetorically Speaking at 7:30. Also on Thursday, in the next 4 Thursdays, I got my homegirl. I'm about to call her Dr. Stephanie Tisdale. She's in a doctoral program. But I have Stephanie Tisdale and myself. We will be having a talk back on the James Baldwin Nikki Giovanni conversation. We're going to do it in half hour intervals. again, talk about somebody who's gonna push back against anything that I say. She is one of those people. So again, check that out on Thursday. You'll see a flyer for that. But again, I appreciate you all. Can I get permission to play the because I know people don't fools with Umar, so I want to get permission to play my Umar I'm accepting gifts. Can I play that? Can I? All right, we got to know from Minister. What about you?
I gotta go.
All right. Peace out. All right, yo, Cash App, #Quantify LLC. I'm gonna pay it twice tomorrow. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Always, Phil, anytime.